Growing up, I would sit up with my father, and there was stories of my grandfather. My grandfather passed away 2 years before I was born, so a lot of what I had in the beginning was talking to my father about it. And we would almost every night, last several hours before bed, it was rodeo. And it was stories of Wiley, stories of Jim Shoulders, Slim Pickens, stories of, just rodeoing. And then, try to remember all those different things. But I was young then. And then so probably, it's been over the years, I've tried to find information out, but there really wasn't a lot. It's out there, it's just you got to be able to find it. And it's not as well organized because it's the old stuff. And so I had some photos and a couple programs, that kind of thing, and then stories. And then when I found out I was going to be a father, I had to make sure I wrote everything down. It was like, you build the room, you do the thing, all the things, and then one of the things is I got to get that history together that I have. I just got to make sure it's together. And that's how it started. And so about 7, 8 years ago is when I've really hit it pretty hard. And it's just been almost daily. I go through and find things. And it's just been one of those things where I knew he rodeoed. I knew he did it for a long time, and I know he was everywhere, and he was highly regarded. But then I heard those things, but then the more I researched it, I realized I'm just still scratching the surface on what he did, because he was from 1931 to 1977, and I've gone through quite a bit, and it's like a book I can't put down. It's one of those things where it's not the story's still there, and I discover things about the story every day. And I reach out to people weekly and just dig into any information I can about them. So it's been pretty much just a passion of mine, and it's also, I think, for historical purposes and family, it's just, those are the two most important things, is history and family. So I'm just kind of building it so that story and that information is not lost. I think I always knew that he rodeoed, but I didn't know quite to the extent. It was 30 plus cities, major rodeos with the smaller ones in between, and he did it pretty much, I think, throughout the year from, late teens until he passed away. And it was, just going from one place to the next with a little bit of time off, I think, at the very end of the year. Him being a turtle, I'd read about the turtles, and then finding his name, and then I found out my grandmother was a turtle. So she was also, back when that wasn't very common, then she was a turtle, he was a turtle, and then he was digging in and kind of just lining up history, just learning history about when things happened. He was there, his first rodeo that he was a trick rider in was the first man to create the rodeo clown barrel. So he was there for that, never knowing that eventually he would be a barrel clown at the very end of his career. So he was there for that. He was working when they formed the Turtles, and then he became a member of the Turtles. Then he was RCA, then PRCA. So it's just kind of the realizing how far back and how close he was to the beginnings of everything. The people that he learned from were some of the first. They came from Wild West shows and some like legitimate clowns from almost like circus kind of content, and they came in and mixed in with rodeo, and that's who he learned from. So he was from kind of the beginnings. He learned from the guys from the beginnings when he was really young. So that's just kind of it surprised me. I just knew he did it, but I just didn't know to what depth he was from the beginning. So I've dug in a little bit, interviewing some people, and then reading the newspaper, the old newspapers, old programs, old things in the archives, hearing some stories about people that knew him or that could tell me a story that they heard from somebody. A little bit of everything, just, here and there, and then I'll get a piece of a story, and then I'll be reading. I got to the point where I'd get into reading newspapers from the 40s, and it was a thing. Oh, yeah. And I could get deep into it. And then I would go, well, I know that. Well, wait a minute. And I have a spreadsheet now that I've got about 300 entries on this spreadsheet, and I've got it listed with sources and things. And I'll go, okay, well, he was here for this. Well, this is the grandkid of this. Let me reach out and see if I can find them. And you tell them, oh, that was my grandfather. And they'll say, well, call this person. And then I would call that person. And it's just one of those things where it's like a giant onion. It's just, you just keep peeling, and there's just so much depth. So it's been a little bit of everything, just some reading. I watch, as extreme as it sounds, I'll watch old rodeo film at 2 times the speed, and I'll just watch it and fast forward to get through a whole bunch of things, and I'll go through, it's not only YouTube, but each state has their own archive, and some counties have their own archive, so I'll find on my spreadsheet where there was a notable rodeo, or maybe it got press, or they did a really good program, and I'll go back and I'll just watch hours of people's home footage that never doesn't maybe list rodeo, or sometimes it lucks out and it does list it, and I just wait. He was 5'3", so I wait till, and I know his routines, and I know how he dressed. Everybody had their own way, and I see that figure come up, and then, okay, I add one to the spreadsheet, or it's not on the spreadsheet, and I put it together.
What was his act like?
It was, from everything I've seen, it was very clean comedy. He was the hobo, the old hobo clown, because he grew up in the Great Depression, and that was kind of life for them in terms of what was happening in society. So he got a little bit of the hobo clown. He had a lot of animals, mules, ostriches, skunks. He had a midget bull, old bad eye, a bunch of different chimpanzees. I think my dad would have to, when he was on the road in and out, my dad would hold up the things on the farm in the panhandle, and he would have to take care of some of the animals. And he had some monkeys that sometimes, they were like, just like the dentist, the chimpanzee was just like the family. So it was like a mixture of, he would go out and fight bulls, and then in between the transition, he would put on various acts. And then I think up until probably the 50s, he rode bulls also. So I found some photos of him riding bulls. He would ride bulls, and then I think once his show really stuck and he started to really get booked for really big things consistently, then I think he backed off of and did clowning and the bullfighting that was his thing after that. And I think Tom Nix was, he was like an old rodeo kind of, or not really rodeo, more of a Western kind of movie star. And so I think Wiley as a kid, I think everybody that they worked farm, and I think just like with any generation, whatever you start out as, you always have this other thing. And I think he would go to them when they would able to afford it. He would go and see this, this movie star, and he was the hero, and he would ride and do all these things. And I think Wiley got the idea that was going to be his thing. It was probably a common thing for young men at that age, because that was what was big. And
where did he grow up?
In the Panhandle of Texas. Okay. So he's born in Vernon, and then they were in and around Vernon, Twitty, and then they went up to like Wheeler County and all that, Wheeler, Briscoe area. So all through the Panhandle. And I think he saw that, and he said, that's what I want to do. And he made his own saddle, and he managed to get a albino mare for his birthday in his mid-teens. And so he would trick ride, self-taught his trick riding between duties on the farm. Apparently people would pull over and everybody would just sit and watch him. And I guess he got pretty good, and then he got pretty brave also, and he snuck away from the family farm and traveled all the way to Canadian Texas and performed that first trick. I think he had probably a teen rodeo before that. I have not been able to find where or what, just mention of it, but I have not been able to find where. He had a teen rodeo or so before that, but his first one where he was out in the arena was in about 31, and he did his trick riding, and it was this big success. And so I think he thought, I'm making it now. And in that sneaking away from the house, he decided to, I guess they call it sacking out, or he decided to stay out and camp out with the older cowboys on the Studer farm with the rancher there. And he thought he made it and everything, and the horse managed to escape and run all the way home and tapped on the family door and woke the family up, and I guess told him my grandfather. And then after that, he took the pseudonym the Canadian Kid. Because growing up, I never knew. I go, we're not from Canada. And my dad would just laugh when I was real little. He said, well, that was his name. That's the name he went by. And I go, I don't understand. Well, now I know from research and talking to, like, Gail Warner has a lot of great books, and then talking to different people, and then, kids of somebody that, Wiley's, their father was friends with Wiley, or their grandfather was friends, and he got that name, and he was hiding his identity so he could go out and still rodeo. And then throughout the newspapers, I've searched Wiley McCray, and then I would search the change of, common misspellings of Wiley McCray. And I'd find things, and I go, well, let me see what Canadian Kid pulls up. And I found a whole nother thing where he went out, I think in about 1935, Charlie Schultz was the one that kind of started to get him recruited into the thing, because he was first in bull riding several times. He was trick riding, and then he was starting to fight bulls in what they would call clowning. And then Schultz said, hey, you need to seriously think about this. So I think they went out to his far place was Oregon, and he was only the Canadian Kid at that point. And then what I realized is the newspaper takes off on things, and they'll embellish, especially back then. And it was fresh from Canada, because they didn't know the Canadian Kid was Canadian Texas, and fresh from his time out on the West and going through Canada, the Canadian Kid, and it would be this long description of who was going to be there, and he was a Wild West, cowboy and all this, and they don't know that he was self-taught. He was, brand new, what they would consider green at the time, and he started there and just kind of, then he got into was really hit it off with the, the rodeo clown and bullfighting, and that's what stuck. But I think from what I've read, he would still trick ride in shows just on his mule in his comedy acts. The trick riders would come out, and he would be on his, he would ride his mule around, or he would try to ride his midget bull and all kinds of different things. I've started to try to put it on a map, but it gets to the point where it looks like, almost a spider web of, I gotta back off because I need to color coordinate it or something, or change the way the map looks so I can actually see decade by decade. And then even in some of my dad's baby book, it talks about where they went. And so when my dad, born in the 40s, they went to Canada, all over Canada, and then they would go, and Freddie, my dad, went to Old Mexico, and he was just a baby, and we would go rodeo, and so it was Old Mexico, all through Mexico, Mexico City, and he has his outfit that he got from Mexico, and he had his own act with the cape and everything, kind of similar to what Slim Pickens was about. They went through Canada, and then pretty much everywhere that had a rodeo. And I know I'm scratching the surface because 145 different places, but the description of people talking about him say that he was here and there, pretty much every state, but some of the things on the East Coast, a couple of those states. But I think I counted up, it's almost pretty much everywhere that there was a rodeo, he had been 16 or 17 times at Calgary, what I've been able to find, about 15 or 16 times Tucson, Los Angeles, Chicago, pretty much everywhere you could almost think. It's a pretty neat thing, because I always realized, he did some, but that was the entire life was traveling. Him and my grandmother just trade in the duties, and then he got really good, and then he started to fly places, and he would get multiple rodeos in a single day. Oh, wow. And that was a pretty neat thing to learn, because he would get somewhere and somewhere else would want him. So he'd hop on a plane, fly there, do his rodeo, then travel somewhere else. And I was able to find I went to the Butler Museum in Oklahoma, and they have their old ledgers behind glass, and I was able to find that in 1950 he was paid $500 for a performance. And then I found somewhere else it was mentioned
that 1950.
$2,600 he was paid for, it's like $2,600 he was paid in the late 40s or early 50s for a four-hour appearance. And so he started to, and I was like, okay, that's why he could afford to fly, I guess, it was investment. And you could see in the beginning it would be just rodeo clown, and then I know it was him, and then Canadian Kid, and all of a sudden Wiley McCray with his famed, if it was his educated mule or whatever it was, and then it would start talking about, and then they would get more and more elaborate with the descriptions of he's famed clown is coming to town, he's fresh from Canada and Mexico and all these things, and they just really, you could tell how it was built. And then he got some movie parts and things like that where he was in the movies and stuff. So I think his apex of everything was probably the 50s. He still was notable throughout, but the 50s is where he was still fighting bulls. He fought bulls a little bit still. I found film of him. He's supposed to be a barrel clown, He's supposed to be older, but I found him outside the barrel running around in the 60s and in the 70s. And I was like, I think he's supposed to be in the barrel. And they go, some of them don't do that all the time. Some of them come back out if they need to be. And so I found advertisements where he'll say, I can be in the barrel or out of the barrel, and it's like he's in his 50s, going into his late 50s by that time. That's still his advertisement. He was everywhere. Well, he was born in Vernon, but he was from Briscoe. They had a ranch in Briscoe. I found 2 different spots, gone back, and I've actually talked to different people, and they say, well, you go down here and you go this way, and then they said, just go and tell them who you are, and people will know who you are. I go, okay. So I went, and they go, oh yeah, you're McCray. Oh, McCray place, and then I befriended some people, and then would go and found some of the old spots, and so it was Briscoe was their home base. In
That's where your dad was raised?
That's where, and I had never been out there. I had stories, and I went this last year, and I'm used to Fort Worth and around, where you're always hearing something, and I went out there, and I go, it's like, I don't hear anything. I had to kind of panic for a second, like, am I hearing? And they go, no, that's just the way it is out here. Like, kind of like it out here, kind of like that. But it's a very small place, and everybody knows. I could go and talk to somebody and go, oh yeah, that's right down, he's over there. And then found, Gail Warner was a really big help because she had notes on everybody. She had a file. She was like, okay, well, I'll share my file with you. And it would have her notes of who, and so I just started following the notes and contacting people, and they'd go, oh, well, contact this person. Oh, well, and it just created this huge wealth of information, all the, kind of following in with what she found, and go out and talk to the people, and people still remember him and things. It's really neat. He did a little bit, but I think it was one of those things where, because he used to tell me he would ride bulls and things, and he would be in the press box as a little kid and running around, and it was like I think it was one of those things where he got to the point to where he'd been hurt a couple times, like probably, and then I think he wanted to go out to college and probably carve a little spot for himself, because he was when he a little bit older, they would go out on the road and he would stay and take care of all the animals and the farm. And Wiley was the first irrigation farmer in Briscoe, so he had lots of things my grandfather had lots of things to do. And so my dad would take up with that, and I think my dad finally kind of got to the point where he kind of wanted something for himself, and that was life for him, every day in and day out. So it's probably a common thing for him, and I think he wanted to go out and go to college and things, and then he ended up getting drafted and going to Vietnam. My father did, so I think he just got further from home, and that maybe that lifestyle is not always for everybody, because you're on the road pretty much your entire life. I don't know if my dad was on the road his entire life, kind of taste for him, possibly. He loved rodeo and he would talk about rodeo, but he just, I think, wanted something different. It's me, my wife, my son is also named Wiley, he's 7, my sister Kim, and then some family members that were connected to, so it was like, and I found out this kind of at the last minute, they messaged, it's Wiley's niece's family side, a couple of them are coming out. And so, and then that's pretty much all the people that we'll have that'll be here. I know Jess Franks is going to sit with us at the table with his wife. And then we had Marvin Klein was going to come up, and because he knew Wiley throughout the 70s when they rodeoed together. And Marvin's given me a ton of inside, I don't know what this means. Can you tell me about this? I have a list of questions, and I'll call Marvin, and Marvin will give me all the details. And Marvin and Wiley rodeoed. Wiley was in the barrel, and Marvin was the bullfighter, the younger bullfighter, but they spent quite a bit of time together. Marvin was going to come up, and then he's ill right now, so he's not able to make it. But it's pretty much just a kind of a small table. Okay. Smaller than probably, I think Clayman's got like 3 tables, but we're just about 1 table.
Sure.